we'll begin here shortly. Actually, we're a little bit over, aren't we? Cool. 4 minutes over. All right, well, the doors are here. We'll go ahead and begin. We were having some technical difficulties earlier, but I think it's all been worked out. So I may have to call up my assistant over there to help me out kind of later with some demos. I'm Eric Orman. I'm a senior program manager within the remote desktop team. I primarily specialize in Azure RemoteApp. I've got 4 kids. I like the Seattle Seahawks. As you can tell from my accent, I'm from the United States, so bear with me. Azure RemoteApp, that's where I live and die. And in my previous life, I was in the United States Army for 12 years, did a lot of cool things, traveled the world. I will apologize for these slides. They're in like a horrible orange color, which you guys are probably used to. But in the Army, I was in the Signal Corps, communications. And so the color of that was orange. So it kind of leads to some interesting things. So let's dive right in. What is Azure RemoteApp? Azure RemoteApp is your Windows applications anywhere on any device. If you guys tried the demo out, which most of you guys had, you get to see that. And as what Brad Anderson says, it enables users to be productive on the devices that they love. Pretty much everyone saw Brad Anderson's keynote yesterday. It doesn't matter. It's QuickBooks remoted to you. It's Dynamic CRM. It's Microsoft Access. It's your own line of business applications. Hosted in Azure and streamed to you, your Win32 applications. So what is it? Like I said before, it's your Windows 32 applications hosted in Azure. They're streamed to you, and you're able to access those particular applications on various clients, so Android, iOS, Mac, Windows. And we do that through native Microsoft Remote Desktop technology. And we scale. As part of a service, you don't have to worry about scale. How many of you guys have actually done VDI deployments, or you guys manage those and do those? So the Azure RemoteApp, you don't have to worry about that scale. And we have kind of 2 different deployment options. And the easiest way I kind of describe and kind of think about what Azure RemoteApp is Azure RemoteApp is like what O365 did for an on-prem deployment Exchange. How many of you guys were Exchange admins or dealt with that? But yeah, it's heavy. You got to deal with the servers, backup data, management, keep the power bill on. But when you go to O365, you bring 2 things. You bring your identity, and you bring your content, your email. Azure RemoteApp, same thing. Your identity's already there because it was O365. And now all you got to do is put your apps up there. That's it. You create an image that has your applications on it, upload it into Azure or import it. I'm going to show you guys how to do that. And simply add users and publish your applications. That's easy. You don't need to worry about DMZs or DNSs or scale up or scale down. That's what you're paying us to do. We handle all that. We keep you focused on the things that are most important to you, just like you would if you're an O365 admin. So we've got a couple of deployment options, and I'm going to go over those more. But really, why are people looking at Azure RemoteApp today? And so I do a lot of customer outreach. I'm talking, here. I'll be at the booth. I do our forum moderation, presentations, and a lot of things. And kind of the general themes of what people are looking at Azure RemoteApp today for is that typical VDI replacement. So they're looking either to move to the cloud, kind of what we internally call cloudify, or reduce complexity, which we really call simplify. And so those are the 2 big tenets of what O365 was to Exchange, the same reason that people are looking at Azure RemoteApp. And you get to bring as is. So if you don't have to rewrite your application. It just needs to be compatible on Windows Server 2012 R2. Install it on that, upload it up, and publish your applications. In terms of running anywhere on any device, this isn't just limited to like iOS and Android. That's not mobility. Mobility is if you're using a remote desktop gateway or some type of gateway and your users are anywhere. It's about remote access. Those applications could be anywhere on any device. Kind of general use cases that we've seen for this one thus far have really been around Microsoft Office, Office Anywhere. People want that full Office experience on any device. That includes like Excel and all your macros and all your plugins, or even could be Access. I can run full Access on my Mac. Or I've created a really cool Access kind of dashboard which my users or customers actually engage with, and you could remote that to your iOS or Android device. Another example, Dynamics CRM, Dynamics AX, which happens to be one of the most top used applications in Azure RemoteApp. ERP and CRM apps we're seeing are probably the highest usage applications in there. So that's kind of run on any device. You know, some of the things people want to move from CapEx, they don't want to pay a power bill. They want to move it to OpEx. They want to simplify. They want to centralize their management. Those are one of the common pillars and tenets of what a remote desktop solution is. Central management of those applications and be able to run it on any device and basically secure those devices. And today, we actually announced on the Remote Desktop blog that our iOS and Android clients are now MAM-enabled, which are pretty cool. So let's go back a little bit and do a little history lesson. So session-based computing had been around for a while. 2008, we came out with Remote Desktop Virtual Host, or what we call typically VDI. We have dedicated hosts. And then kind of in this cloud motion, we have kind of two options for customers. You could take what you typically have as Server 2012 R2. Let's say, for example, create some Azure IaaS VMs and install it up there. We actually have a lot of people doing that. How many of you guys have actually done that? A couple few. All right. So that's one option, is you don't want to pay that power bill and you want to move to just use a hoster. That could be on Amazon, that could be on Google, that could be on Azure. It's just you're still managing that environment. You still have to handle the scale up and scale down. But what we're focused on is Azure RemoteApp. That's our turnkey solution, and I already kind of explained what that is. So that's where we're really going to be focusing on the rest of this time. So you guys are all here for the fundamentals session. So that's now. On Thursday, I'll be doing a deep dive. It's basically a 350 to 400. So today, we're really setting the foundation to understand Azure RemoteApp so that you could go on this journey in what I call the life cycle of an administration. So at the end of this presentation, you guys, or during the presentation, you could follow on, look up your laptops. You'll be able to create an Azure RemoteApp deployment, and you'll have applications streamed to you by the end of this presentation. I pretty much guarantee it. But at the end of this, you'll have a general knowledge. You'll understand the different deployment options and use cases. And then at the advanced session on Thursday, we're going to deep dive, go really deep in understanding the service, the architecture, common troubleshooting, integration with Config Manager, Skype for Business, AppB, and those particular things. So when you bring these two together, you really get a holistic view, kind of that 400. So I would say to get the most out of your time here, go to both these sessions. The advanced, this will be the first time I'm actually giving it publicly. So I did it internally in July to the Microsoft, we call it Tech Readies internally. And then I gave it to our MVPs. We had the Microsoft MVP Summit about 2 weeks ago, and I gave it to those guys. And I got really great reviews. So it's a lot of awesome content, again, Thursday at that time. So I gave you kind of an overview of what is Azure RemoteApp. I'm going to go over, spend the bulk of the time on what I call the life cycle of Azure RemoteApp. And then at the end, we'll go up, will my app work? And so common questions of, hey, I have this line of business application, or I have that one. I'm going to walk you through, I'm going to use QuickBooks as an example. It's a really, you guys might laugh, but it's probably the most asked application. Can I host QuickBooks on Azure RemoteApp? And it's a really good application to kind of talk through. You'll get the point when I get there. And then if I talk really, really fast and we don't take questions, I can give you a quick troubleshooting 101. So we'll see where things go. I have a lot of material, so I would please hold your questions until the end. I'll be available at the booth, the Enterprise Mobility booth, or available up at stage or outside the door after this. But I really want to maximize my presentation time to you guys. So before we go any further, Azure RemoteApp as a service. We're constantly iterating. In fact, we iterate so fast, you'll hear me say this quite a few different times. We do service upgrades twice a month, usually on the first week and about the third week. We upgrade our service. So we're constantly fixing issues, adding new features, enhancing, and fixing things based upon what we learned through our customer support escalations or incidents that customer has, or just through our telemetry. We're seeing how customers are using it, and we want to optimize. We're constantly iterating and adding improvements to things. And we communicate those through our monthly blogs. How many of you guys have been reading the blogs or knew about the blogs? A couple few? Okay, cool. Yeah, it's the Remote Desktop blog. You go out there every month. I actually write these blogs. Every month we publish everything that's going on. So the October one, we just published usually on the 5th of the month, published the previous. But that's the best way to stay updated about what's going on, because we are changing, we are updating, and we're moving fast. And like everything else in Azure, it's at a rapid pace. So that's the best way. And then we also publish a public roadmap. So you get to see, hey, here's our future direction of where we're going. We're going to have the ability to publish application publishing. We'll have a MSI for the Windows client that'll coming out. So lots of things coming. So public roadmap, we actually will communicate that in the blog also. But best way to know, hey, this is where we're going, and the blogs of where we've been. All right, so enough of the formalities. Let's talk about the deployment options. So we've typically, for the last year, we've had 2 deployment options that we've talked about, cloud and hybrid. Boy, those are confusing. What is cloud? It's in the cloud, but isn't it? So at the end of the day, we're kind of rebranding, going through that. So if you hear me say cloud deployment of Azure RemoteApp, what I really mean is a non-domain join deployment. And when you hear me say hybrid, what I'm really saying is a domain join. And I'm going to talk in depth to these particular things. But understand, those are kind of terminologies. We've kind of just went through this change, so my mouth and my mind, and I get talking fast, and so you kind of understand if I say cloud and what that exactly means. So non-domain join, that's kind of just workgroup PCs. Let's keep going. So here's the life cycle management. And we're going to go around this entire thing and kind of hit each of these points. We're going to deep dive. So the first is, how do I even get my apps into Azure RemoteApp? I'm going to walk you through how to do that, considerations for that, and best practices. And then how do I publish? Whoops. I'm a little quick. I only had 2 Red Bulls this morning. No, I'm joking, just 1. So publish applications. How do I publish applications? How do I assign users? And then the end user experience. How do I utilize, evaluate, what's that end user experience interacting with the applications? And then lastly, hey, I need to make changes or updates. How do I go about doing all of that? And so this is kind of the life cycle. I keep coming back to this at each phase, but this is where we're going to go. So life cycle, select an image, add my app. So let's deep dive in this section. I'm going to talk about those items that are available up under there. How many have created Azure RemoteApp deployment? 8 steps. It's that easy. Let's just do it. So I'm over here into the Azure console. You guys can't see. Why is... Maybe I need to drag it over. Oh. This is unusual. All right, I'm over here in the Azure console or management portal. You guys are pretty familiar with this. I don't need to give an overview of this. Okay. All right, if I go down to new, I'm going to click on that. Oops. I should have just made this extended out. Yeah, I'm going to extend this out. Sorry. This is kind of hard to do that on the other one. Why? Right, click create. I'm going to name it. Let's call it Ignite Live. I'm going to specify a region. So this is the data center that I actually want to deploy it into. Pick which data center that you want. Let's pick West US. Actually West Europe, because my fingers are crazy. Pick a relative billing plan that you want. We'll just pick basic and this. Select your image. So the image is what, the image has the applications, and we have 3 default ones that you could have up there. In fact, for the sake of just this, I'm going to go back for West US. And in here, you can see I've actually uploaded a couple of other images that are in there. And the images has your applications that you can publish on it. So, but for the sake of this, I'm going to pick this Office one, and I'm going to click Next. And that's it. That's how easy it is to create a deployment that's up there. Let me show you just tour over here on this node. If I scroll down, this thing's really touchy. So there's RemoteApp. If I click on that, you can see it's provisioning in there. I've got one other one up here that's already active. That's the one I'm going to keep coming back to on this. But that's it. In about 20 minutes, this is going to be done. I'm going to explain what happens during that 20 minutes here shortly. But that's easy. That's it. 8 steps. That's how you create a deployment. Didn't need to do anything else. Oh, here's the mouse. It's way over here. That'll make my life easier. So what is an image? An image contains your applications. I kind of covered this. We have some pre-provided images. You don't have admin access to these. This is the best way to just kind of get a good jump start to get to figure it out. And then later on progress to creating your own image. I'm going to show you guys how to do that. And so there's a couple of differences about those images that I have listed up there. But really, you have your own line of business application, let's say QuickBooks or Dynamics. What you'll need to do is create an image, a VHD, install it on there, follow the different steps, and upload that image. And we'll create the collection. So you could do that a number of different ways. You have Hyper-V. You could bare metal it, create it. We actually have steps of how to create it. You could automate it using Config Manager 2012 R2. They actually have a pretty cool OSD task sequence that will create a VHD, so you could automate that, kind of that gold image. Or you could use an Azure VM, and I'm going to show you guys how to do that. We actually have templates that are up there, and then import it. We'll say that if you create it on premises, it might be a couple of gigs to upload. So it's always recommended that we say to build it up in Azure when you first start to get familiarity with how to do it. Using Office in Azure RemoteApp. So Office 0365 Pro Plus is the only supported way to use Office in Azure RemoteApp. Now that comes bundled with all E3 and E4 subscriptions, or you can buy it as a separate add-on. I think it's like $2 a month to a business plan. But the primary reason why 0365 Pro Plus is because it uses shared computer activation. And so in my advanced session, I deep dive in how that works underneath the covers on that. But that's the primary key takeaway from here is Office 365 Pro Plus is the only way to use Office in Azure RemoteApp. So let me pop out here. Let me give you a demo of how to create an image. I got messed up again. So I'm back up here. I'm in Azure. Basically go down to virtual machines. I'm going to click on new. And I'm going to do a gallery image in here. So virtual machine from gallery. And there's actually two of them that we have. So there's this one right here, the session host, or you can pick this other one that has Pro Plus. The only difference between them is we've done some of the little work for you with this Office 365 Pro Plus one and pre-installed it for you. That doesn't mean you get Office for free. It just means that you saved you the headache of actually having to install Office and configure it and do everything. We did that for you. You click Next. You give it a name, Ignite Demo 1. You can pick whatever size you want. You'll be charged for this creation, creating your image. So if you want to pick like a G5, sure, go ahead and do it. It'll create it really, really fast, and it'll tear through your pocketbook on that. But typically, I just pick an A3. I give it a username. Next. Pick your relatively cloud service that you want it to be in. Those particular, it doesn't matter. You're just creating an image. You're later going to import this. So antivirus, you can either pick one of the pre-selected ones here, Semantic, Trend, Microsoft Anti-Malware, or later on you can install one yourself. So I always like to just select the Microsoft one. That's quick and easy. And I click Next. And there we go. It's going to start creating this image. Now, that'll take a little bit. See the power of cooking. I actually have one that's already pre-created in here. I did this morning. So, and at this point in time, I'm just going to RDP to it. So at this point in time, just install your applications. QuickBooks, Dynamics, your own line of business application. You don't need to install click once applications on here. I'm actually going to show you how to do that later. But install your relatively applications on here. Make any necessary changes or configurations, apply any GPOs that you want to on here, or special things. And that's pretty much it. The last thing you do before you sysprep this is basically you need to run this validation script that is up here. And what this validation script is this will ensure that the image is properly configured or you didn't set things that might harm during the import process or the creation of that. And so the script's going to generally run. It's going to output and tell you usually runs pretty quick. There we go. It's going to run, tell you basically everything was good, and do you want to sysprep it? You select yes, it's going to go through a sysprep process. Then after that, you'll just want to simply capture it and import it into Azure RemoteApp. And so if I click yes here, I'm not going to do that right now, but basically what's going to happen is it's going to sysprep that particular image. And then after that's done, I'll come on here to capture down at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to have to capture it. And then once I've done with the capture, it's going to create it there it is. At the end of after that capture, I've got one pre-created right here where I went through that capture. It's already captured, so it's just in a VHD format, just sitting in my image library. Now at this point in time, I need to import it over into Azure RemoteApp. So I've created my custom image. It's pretty easy to create it, kind of basically on that. I'm going to head back over to Azure RemoteApp. And then in here in my template image gallery, as you can see, there's quite a few of them in here. I'm going to click Add. And there's a couple of options. So if you created this on premises and you want to upload it, this is the steps that you would go through right here also. So I can either upload a new image template, or I could just do an import. The import, I could pick the particular name in here. I confirm that following on here. These are very important for you to read, the app requirements and image requirements. You never want to store data on this image. I'm explain to you why. And so the key takeaway, you never want to store data. So putting your databases on this image, never do that. Put any sensitive data that might be lost, never do that. This is the gold image that you have. And we're going to simply just create clones of this, and that's how we do our auto scale. I'll explain that in a couple slides. But the key takeaway is you'll never want to put data on this. I'll give the example later on about QuickBooks. You never want to put the QuickBooks company file on the custom image. It needs to reside externally. So there's a couple of hyperlinks here. Click on that, follow it through, next, name it, do the import. It's very important where you pick the import location, because that's only where you can create your remote app collection. In the beginning, I picked West Europe, or West US, I think. Yeah, West US. If I imported to North Central US, I can't create a Azure Remote App collection in West US. So they need to be in the same data center. That's the key here. You click next. It's going to go through that import process, and it's going to simply just list the image right there available for you. Then you can go back and create a collection, or you can go and patch an existing collection. Pretty straightforward. You just need to create an image. You can use one of our galleries in Azure, install your applications, sysprep, capture, import, create your collection. Pretty basic and straightforward. That's how you get your applications to Azure RemoteApp. Let's hop back out here to the slides. So there's a couple of considerations. I'm going to go through this one. Application compatibility and testing. So the base image for Azure RemoteApp is Windows Server 2012 R2. We don't support 2008 or 2008 R2. Support for Server 2016 is coming early next year. We're making some changes in that. But really, Windows Server 2012 R2. And so just general things to be aware of. What we found through our testing is approximately 85% of all applications are compatible if they follow standard Windows guidelines for application development. They need to be multi-user aware, and basically also test them to make sure that they work. I'm not going to get into this detail. I think you guys all know what application compatibility is about. But there's a couple of resource links here that you guys can download the slides and check out at a later point in time. So template image, you could either, so here's a couple of key takeaways. And all these might not make sense right now, but they're good things to go back and reference later on. We have documentation down at the bottom is a link, so you can follow up with that and look at these particularly later on when you guys download the slides. Key ones for this one is always create and test your application. So when I was creating my image up there, launch your application, make sure it works, test it, and everything. There are some nuances where some applications do not survive a sysprep. You should be aware of what those are, and talk with your application vendor. There's certain applications that have nuances about installing in a remote desktop session host environment. Adobe is kind of like, Adobe Reader is kind of the big one that we see. There's like a special registry key that you need to set. There is some considerations about deploying applications in a multi-session environment. Same considerations if you're using normal terminal services today with a remote desktop session host. So we talked about creating a deployment, 8 steps. pretty quick and easy. And then it's in that provisioning state. It's like, what's going on in the provisioning state? During that particular time, what is happening underneath the covers is you had that master image. That was your VHD that you imported and you selected and created it. And so what's happening underneath the hoods is we're creating clones of those, much like in the theme of Star Wars. There's a clone army. Jango Fett was the primary guy, and we had all these guys that were cloned after him. And so Azure RemoteApp we talk about is this elastic runtime where it scales up and scales down. You don't need to handle that. All you need to worry about is assigning users and assigning applications. We handle the rest. Remember? So how does that work underneath? Well, as users start to sign on, we're actually going to know that. We're going to create more instances on the back end. So more users come in, we're going to spin those up, and we're going to expand up, and we're going to expand down. Not something that you guys need to worry about, just understanding how it works a little bit. I dive into greater detail in my advanced session into this. So this is just a good understanding of how that works. And so it's really important that as these instances, 1, 2, 3, and 4, those are all clones of that master one. So going back to my other point where I stomped my foot and I said, make sure you do not put data on that image. It's because the data is external. So those instances are really just kind of dumb hosts for the applications. All that data needs to reside externally, SQL Azure, file servers, somewhere else. So behind the scenes, all those instances, it doesn't matter what billing plan that you choose. If you go, we always have a A3 large VM, which has 4 cores and 7 gigs of memory. And underneath, our billing plans are related to that. I talk in greater detail of how that works in my advanced session, but just understanding what those are. And so as in a shared environment, CPU fair share is enabled. So when you have multiple users that are concurrent connections, CPU is going to be there. But there's no RAM fair share. There's no concept of that. So certain applications might have memory leaks with it, or they might, users using a lot of other, which is going to impact your performance. I go into a lot more detail in my advanced session of that. And so really just knowing that, it's kind of little key things about that. So that's how to get your image up into Azure, your applications into Azure RemoteApp. Now let's talk about how you publish your applications. So this is all a full demo session for this one right here. So I've created this Azure RemoteApp collection. It's still in provisioning mode. That'll be done in about 20 minutes. So here we are. Oh, grief. Why does it keep changing? Thank you. All right. So let me pop out because you guys didn't get to see that. So here we are. I have 3 collections. We call them collections. You could call them deployments or collections. Don't be confused with config manager collections as I get, but it's really just a deployment. And so if I click into one of these, there's a couple of tabs that are very important up to the top. There's the dashboard tab, and that walks you through kind of the billing. So it shows the usage of this over a period of time. User access, this is where you assign users. So in this, I'll get to this shortly. So I've assigned 2 users here. This is a cloud or a non-domain join, so I get assigned anybody that Microsoft account or Azure Active Directory. So anybody want to be a volunteer here? Microsoft account? Yeah, what's yours? So that's going to go out. Cool. All right, save. Now, if she launches her remote desktop client and signs in with that, she's going to see a list of applications that I'm going to show you how to publish. It's that easy to assign users. Let's go over to here, the publishing tab. And this thing eats up a lot of space. So here's the publishing tab. Here's the list of applications that are published. I didn't pick anything fancy. I just used one of the gallery images, so Word, Visio. There's a couple of other ones that are on here. And so how you will actually want to publish is down here below. But before I do that, I want to get to sessions. So over here at sessions, would show if there's any active sessions available. And then scale, this tab here is where you could select your billing plan later on. So if you find for whatever reason you chose the basic plan, you can actually change it to standard, premium, premium plus. It's showing twice here because I have an internal versions of those. And then support. This is awesome over here for support. So if you guys are going through this and get stuck, go to support. We provided really cool hyperlinks to get out to our documentation, our discussion forum, our feedback forum, how to open a customer support. Chat, if If you send anything to this, it'll go directly to me. It's a good way. And then here's a link to our blog out there. But let's go back here to publishing. There's a list of applications. And down here, very at the bottom, I'm not going to zoom it because the resolution is so big. But down here, I have two options. I could publish using path. I'll show you how to do that. Or I could publish from start menu. So this is the start menu of that image that you uploaded. So if your applications had shortcuts in the start menu, then they're actually going to show up here. And so here was the available applications that were in the start menu of mine. Like, let's pick Access. I'll just pick that one, and I can pick Adobe Reader if I want to pick that one. I'm going to click Next. And so it's just going to publish those applications out to you that are available on there. Very simple. But let me hop out. I'm going to walk you through of actually how to install the client, so on Windows. So here we are. So for Windows, we use a Click Once client. I'm going to get into this a little bit later on. But here's our client download page. We actually have a new one, but this one's still around. But if I click Download, it knows I'm on a Windows PC. I'm going to click Download, and it's going to start. We use a Click Once application. And you're probably wondering, why do you use a Click Once application? Well, we use a Click Once application because, like I said before, we're constantly innovating. We're constantly iterating. We're updating our service. And so if we were to use the inbox MSTSC, we just could not deliver fast enough. So Click Once provides us that agility and that flexibility to ship updates at a very rapid pace. Downloading 17.5 megabytes. We will have, I think it's at the end of this month or early next month, an MSI version of this. So if you're using a group policy or config manager, you can actually deploy it out. You don't have to tell your users to navigate out, like, hey, navigate out to this web page, download and install it. You can programmatically deploy that client out. And so that'll be available here at the end of this month or early next month. So that's particularly going. In the meantime, I'm going to pop over here and grab my, to make this process a little bit quicker. Almost done. So in here, it has finished publishing. If I want to unpublish an application over here, I simply select it. I could select and click Unpublish, and I could unpublish it. So all the users here will be able to get to see all of these applications. So when I talked about earlier, kind of the roadmap slide of per app publishing, what that really means is this user will only get this app. That feature is coming, I think in December. If not, it's going to be in January. So here we are. I'm going to sign in. It's going to show me finding my list of applications. It's going to ask me to authenticate here. I'm going to enter in my credentials. It's going to find my list of available applications. There's the applications that are available to me. And if I want to launch one of these, let's just pick, what's a cool one? Let's just pick Excel. I'm going to click that and launch it. Now, you don't necessarily have to interact with the client here. We actually publish it down to the start menu also. So if I come down here into all apps, there will be an app folder down here that has everything listed for you. What was the name of it? Oh, MVA. I'm sorry. MVA demo. Here we go. Here's the list of applications right here in your start menu. So if you use your native search, you'll be able to do that. You can also pin. If I want to pin this, I could pin to start. So it's available in my start. That was actually a feature that we added recently to that. So they're right alongside those. You don't necessarily have to interact with that. And so here I am. I've launched Excel. So this is a remote app. So has all the same of look and feel of Excel running on this. This could be any application that you have. And so I just happen to use Excel for that. But you know, it is a remote app. I could do a Control-Alt-End. That's like sending a Control-Alt-Delete sequence. So it is definitely a remote app, and that has the same look and feel, everything about it. I think you guys get the hint on kind of that. But yeah, we don't give you a desktop, because desktops, if we were just giving you a desktop, people always ask, what about desktops? That's cool, you have an app, but what about desktop? Well, desktop just means you have to get more steps to get to the app. Because if I give you a desktop, you got to go to Start menu, you got to find the app. How about just give me a shortcut to the app? So we're just saving you a couple of clicks by just doing Remote App. Desktop, sure, give you a desktop, but just means more clicks to get to your application. So that's why we like Azure Remote App. So that's it. That's how you publish it. An application, pretty simple. Now, another example of this of like, hey, how do I publish using a path? If I wanted that, I can name it up here. I can choose Explore. You could publish anything that's available on that image. Actually, I think it's in System 32. But basically, you can pick that, publish anything that you want to. That is available on that image. You can publish BAT files. You can publish exe files. You can publish UNC paths. You can't publish UNC paths from the UI yet. I think they're fixing that here shortly. But you could do it through the PowerShell commandlet. So basically, anything that's available to you on that. Let me show you how to publish a quick one. Actually, using Start menu, if I want to publish a Internet Explorer, this is a good example. So Explorer was actually published. Now if I go back to the Azure Remote App Client, as you can see, nothing's there. I'm going to hit refresh. That's going to go out and get a new list of applications, and look, oh, Explorer was there. And if I wanted to launch that, I simply could click on it, and it's going to launch Explorer, and bam, there's Explorer. That quick, very, very quick. If I want to launch PowerPoint, I can launch PowerPoint. Very, very quick. It has the same feel of everything. So let's go back here. Let's see, I've got Internet Explorer published. One of the things I said is, let's say I don't want to launch Explorer with a default thing. I want to change the paths. So if I select it and down at the bottom, I click Edit. I could actually change the name up here. Let's say Click Once Application as example, and command line parameters. Now, if this was IE, so it's going to launch IE with these command line parameters. Now, I could specify a certain website, if I wanted Google, if I wanted Bing, I could just input them here, and when I launch it, it would just it would open that up. But click once applications are pretty cool and flexible, and so let me show you how to do that. So with click once, you'll get this huge long GUID. This is what you would actually launch. So I'm just going to simply enter that in. I don't have a really good click once application to actually show you. So what I've just entered in was the click once URL for the Azure Remote App client. And so that's going to publish. It's modifying it, as you can see right here. We'll wait till this gets done. Modify. Yes?
You've got two custom apps. What's the primary considerations for whether you use those collections or not?
Good question. I'll cover that at the end. So here, if I click refresh, click once, I'm going to double click that. It's going to launch it. It's going to start streaming the application to me. I'm going to click install. So if you have click once applications, you don't need to actually put them on the image. You can just provide a hyperlink to them and they'll install. All right, that's how you publish applications. Pretty simple. I showed you how to do users on that. So let's keep moving on here. Showed you the demo. AppV. How many of you guys use AppV? Big hands. You got to be proud that you're using AppV. Cool. Yes, AppV is supported in Azure Remote App. Now, there's lots of different ways to deploy AppV. Here's a big Eiffel chart of that. And as we know, AppV is only supported on domain join PCs. So a hybrid deployment or a domain join is the only one that AppV can actually be used on. And there's lots of different ways. When you're deploying AppV, you have a delivery method, streaming or mounted. Where is your AppV location at? Shared content on the disk, targeting user. So here's a couple of positive, negative things as it relates to Azure Remote App of using it. In my next session, I actually deep dive into how to actually do a lift and shift of this and walk you through the steps on that. But really, the key takeaway here is you should be able to use Azure Remote App and AppV without making any changes whatsoever. Create a custom image that has the AppV agent installed. You have to publish the configurations to it, and then AppV, be able to publish your applications to that and just run them. So lifecycle management, here we are. We've done how to get your apps. I've shown you how to publish users. I've actually showed you how to assign users, but there's a little more to that. And so let's deep dive into that. So here we are, non-domain join and domain join. So if you're on a non-domain join or a cloud deployment, we basically support everything on there. AAD Cloud, AD Connected, all those particular things. O365 accounts, how many of you are using O365? Okay, underneath the covers of that, O365 identity sits in Azure Active Directory. Did you guys know that? Yeah, okay, cool. It was one of the things, so I wanted to make sure we called that out. Domain join. Now, domain join, as you can see, doesn't have all the checkboxes next to it. And to understand the reason for that, we need to fundamentally understand the reason how a domain join deployment of Azure RemoteApp or a hybrid actually works. And so let's walk through that. I got a really cool GUI here. I'm going to show you guys that. So I have your on-premises network. You have your domain controller. Everything is on there. First thing that you'll need to do is create an Azure VNet. So this is your virtual network up in Azure. You connect those two using ExpressRoute or VPN. So really, that Azure VNet is just an extension of your on-premises network, just like if you had a remote office or something, and you connect it up with a VNet. So any assets or VMs or anything that you put in that VNet, you should be able to ping, and they should be able to ping back the other way. And they're just connected through that ExpressRoute or that site-to-site VNet configuration. And then the next thing, when you're creating remember those 8 steps? Well, if you're doing a hybrid or a domain join, there's a couple of other steps that you're going to need to provide us down here at the bottom. You're going to have to specify the domain name, so contoso.com, your organizational unit, that OU, what is the AD container that you want these collections to be, or these VMs to be created in, and then what service account we should use for domain join. So once you give us all this, and you click next, and that provisioning happens, when we start making those clones of those Azure RemoteApp instances, what's happening underneath is we're creating copies of them, we're domain joining them, using the credentials that you provided us in the OU that you specified to the domain, which happens to sit back through that ExpressRoute VPN connection on your on-premises network. So at the end of that phase, your Azure RemoteApp instances are domain joined. They're in your OU. You should be able to ping them. You can apply group policy to them. You can do anything that you can to a typical domain joined PC or server on that sense. Kind of makes sense? This is how this particular works. So common hybrid misconfigurations. So these are kind of the common things is your VNet, that VNet in Azure is not big enough. We recommend that you have at least 100 IP addresses available within that are free. A minimum would be 30. DNS issues. Of course, we understand if you do domain join and the DNS is not right, domain join is going to fail. So make sure you look at the Azure VNet and make sure that that DNS is configured properly. And what I didn't show you before is your domain controller could have been in that Azure VNet also. That's another option. But for the sake of this example I talked about, just it was connected back to on-premises network. And then the VNet, so that VNet that you deploy into, very critical, I think you guys all picked up on it, was that VNet needs to have access to that domain controller to allow that domain join to work. Pretty straightforward. I'm seeing a lot of head nods, so everyone's getting the point of that. Really key during that is your custom image validation check. So that script that I showed you to run doing the import, you'll have a similar one if you're creating it and uploading it. There will be a script. Make sure you run that particular script. That's there for your protection. You don't want to not run it and upload it or bypass it or delete some attributes of it, thinking that, hey, it just keeps failing. It's failing for a reason. So make sure you never bypass those checks. Always run the scripts. That way you have a good first run experience. So let's talk about the app launch. So one of the things I didn't show you guys is when I clicked an application and launched it over here, let's go back. So you've set up your collections, you've AD connected. Now if you do a domain join, you could only add users that are AD connected or dir synced. You can't add MSA accounts. So at Outlook.com, like Leah, I can't add that because Leah can't log in to Contoso.com. So only dir synced accounts can be used. And so a typical flow, I showed this. A user's going to sign in to the particular client. He's going to see a list of his available applications. He's going to click on it. And if you're doing a domain join, you're going to get a second prompt. Why are you getting a second prompt? Well, that's the Windows security prompt, because what's happening is use Azure Active Directory for your first sign-in to get a list of your applications. The second prompt is actually an RDP connection to those Azure RemoteApp instances up here, and you're getting a Windows security. Just like if you were to RDP from one PC in your organization to another, you're going to get a prompt. It's the same thing here. So enter it in, username and password. There is a remember credentials, so you only really have to do that once, and you hit OK. That's kind of a hybrid launch story. So going back, why hybrid only had a few of those checkboxes and those things before is because it required 80 connected, those dir sync accounts. It's domain joined. It requires the domain controller to be accessible on that VNet. So kind of explains things in a little greater detail. So before I go any further, what we've noticed through customers, through our telemetry and just talking with them, majority of all of our top customers are using hybrid deployments. We see customers start off with just using a typical non-domain join or a cloud, using one of the gallery images. Okay, I'm going to do that for familiarity. Next, they'll move to I'm going to create a custom image. I'm going to kind of progress on that. And then after a period of time, when they get their, whoops, I went too fast. When they get the express route or site-to-site connection established, and they've done their dir sync, then they'll move to a hybrid. And so we see most customers that are moved to that production deployment are using hybrid deployments. One of the things is you can only assign users from the default directory. So one Azure Active Directory. You can have multiple domains in a particular directory, but you can only assign users from one directory. That's the key takeaway on this. Now, a lot of you said you had O365. One of the common questions we get is, okay, I have this Azure subscription, maybe an MSDN or something, or my organization has an O365, and under the covers there's Azure Active Directory. Well, how do I get those O365 users in another subscription? Well, there's kind of two options. One, if you log on to the O365 portal and scroll down at the bottom, there's Azure AD. If you click on that and follow the numerous prompts, there will be lots of numerous prompts, you'll eventually end up at the Azure portal with a very minimalistic, where you can get your directory here. And then what you can do is actually delegate access. I would recommend using a Microsoft account, so an MSA account. So have your hotmail.com, make them a system administrator, and that's in your O365 Azure AD, and then go over to another subscription and add that same user as administrator. Then you'll be able to add those O365 users. It's just delegation of identity on that. Common misconfiguration. The number one common misconfiguration that we're seeing as customers that are using, this is a lot of test, a lot of people are trying out, is they have their Windows Server Essentials, they're using a non-routable domain like a .local, and they're trying to use that in a particular deployment. And so what you get is a UPN suffix mismatch issue. This is common within O365. The general fix for that is make sure your identity, what you ever put in Azure, you have mapped it back to the user's UPN on the on-premises network. If you just go out and bing UPN suffix mismatch with Azure Active Directory or O365, there's loads of information on that. This is what we see. We actually have a fix, a really creative solution to solve this. So this is just a very short-term problem. We'll actually won't have this problem moving forward with some creative things that our engineers figured out how to do. Multi-factor authentication. How many of you guys are using MFA or Azure? Or a couple few. It's really easy to enable. So Azure RemoteApp works seamlessly with this. If you enable it on a particular your application, it just simply works. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. It's really easy to enable. Go to the Azure portal, click on the application, and flip a setting from off to on. And it's really cool because you can also specify rules. So you don't MFA people if they're on premise network or only external. Really easy, actually, how to do this. I'll deep dive and show you this if we have time. If not, I cover it in my advanced session. And then with anything that uses Azure Active Directory authentication, you get a rich reporting through Azure Active Directory Premium. Brad didn't show that yesterday, but usually he does in his demo. Actually, I think, yeah, he did show this. So if you particular, on this example here, you get per user reporting or per application. I'll actually tell you all of this. And again, if I have time, I'll pop out and show you guys some examples of this. Operations logs. So everything that you do in the portal or PowerShell, adding users, removing users, doing any of that, that's all logged in operational logs. That's just something that we tie into because we're a natural Azure service for that. So here we are. We're back at the life cycle. We've gone through the creation. So this would be at the end of what you would do as an administrator. I mean, you got your app in Azure RemoteApp. You published your app. You've assigned users. You've done all the administrative setup. It's pretty quick and easy on that. Now, let's talk about from a client perspective. So let's talk about what clients are supported. Data and storage and file sharing. I'll need you, Leah. I'll need you to come and sign in. Supported client data storage, user profile disks, and best practices. So let's talk about the clients and devices. We have clients for everything: iOS, Android, Mac, Windows Phone, Windows 7, Windows Embedded. And so as we look at these particular things, each of our clients, I already talked why we don't use the inbox MSTSC client. We actually use our Click Once client. But each of our clients have an immersive experience. So you launch the client, you sign into the particular application, and you get your applications. So each of them, they kind of have the same look and feel. We're doing some rebranding so that they all have a common experience across that. So we have our Mac client that's out in beta right now that's going through not only the UI, but underneath in terms of our core architecture. Windows Embedded and thin clients. So we support all of these, so if you're using those. We don't support third-party RDP implementations. The primary reason for that is, like I said, we're innovating so fast. We can't delegate our SLA for our service. So every Azure service has an SLA. 99.9% of the time, users will be able to launch their Azure Remote apps. That's our SLA. Now, we can't have a third-party vendor creating an RDP client, and Joe Customer he's responsible for our SLA. We can't do that. Our rate of innovation and how fast we're moving, we only support first-party clients at this particular time. So we don't support third-party RDP implementations. So I'm going to pop over here and show you guys one other demo. Cool. Yep. Let's make sure it goes. And so when I talk about all clients, what I actually mean is all clients. So here I'm at a browser. I've got Chrome opened, and I've launched this. And I'm going to pop over here, and I'm going to just go. Now, one of our highest feedbacks that we got thus far is, hey, I would like a client for Linux, Unix, any one of these things. I would like a Chromebook client. I would like a clientless client. Here's your first glimpse at the HTML5 client for Azure RemoteApp. So if I click Login, I'm going to get a particular login prompt. I save my credentials. As you can see, here's my list of my applications. This is running in Chrome, using that for the example. I can simply launch PowerPoint. Let's do that. I think it's going to prompt me for my credentials again. Yes, whoops. There's no box. I told them that they needed to have a box to save your credentials. There we go. I'm running full PowerPoint in Chrome, full experience, everything like I want to. This could be access. So imagine front-loading access in there. Now, if I want to launch more apps, I can simply come up to the bar up here, and I can launch any of these other ones. So Visio, OneNote, these are just the applications that I have published, but anything else, it's an HTML5 browser. So at the end of the day, it'll work on anything that support it. I want to launch Excel. I'm going to click on it, and it's simply going to launch Excel. Boom, Excel is there. Up at the top is kind of where we have our launch bars. Those shows you your applications. So I can go back to PowerPoint if I want to. The reason why it's kind of slow is I'm RDPing all the way into my server, which is in Redmond, Washington, in the US to do it. This is in preview mode internally, so we're using it internally in Microsoft IT. It has not gone public yet, so you guys are going to see the first glimpse of this. In fact, this is the first time we've actually ever demoed it. We've only had 2 customers we've ever shown this to, so it's really exciting to be up here to be able to show you guys this. So that's that. So, like I said before, HTML5, that'll work on Chromebook, Firefox, Safari, Linux, Internet Explorer 11, Edge, any one of those different things. What's also great about this is we actually incorporated a lot of our technology with our codec pipeline. I don't talk about it a whole lot here, but you'll hear more about it. We have some new H.264 with 444 mode that we have running in the background to really optimize our graphics pipeline. That we're running on that. It does do hardware offload, so actually we don't do everything in CPU, so we do hardware decode. So on the client, we actually do hardware decode, so you're going to get a better experience if you have a good GPU. If not, it's going to use CPU. And if you don't, it'll just fall back to CPU. We've really tuned and optimized. And at this point in time also, you're probably going, wow, you know, all this innovations and everything, that's great in Azure RemoteApp. Are you guys going to pay that dividend forward to Server 2016? And the answer to that is yes. We're putting all this stuff, all these innovations, everything the service allows us to do. Our engineers actually love it because they're constantly iterating and constantly improving, and they get immediate feedback. They don't build a product, you know, build a little thing, and then ship it, and then 3 years later get some escalation through our customer support. And it's like, oh man, if I only would have had this one line code change, we could have solved some problems or had this experience. The cool thing about a service is we constantly learning. We're learning through our telemetry, we're doing fixes, and all those are being paid forward into Server 2016, which is pretty cool. Client best practices. Always close your applications to prevent data loss. Why is that important? I'll cover it the next slide. But with anything else, if your applications suddenly drop off, you have a potential for data loss. The next one is, we talked about that iteration. We use that click once for Windows. Well, pretty much on all third-party, or not third-party, but other non-Windows device, Android, Mac, they all have an app auto update. We recommend that you turn that on, simply because you want to always have the latest client. We're constantly shipping updates. We communicate that in our blogs, so you always want to make sure you have the latest client version. And I don't cover it here, but in my advanced slide, you know, we're innovating on the client. On the server side, we have an equal. We actually don't use the native term serve host within the clients. We actually install a new side-by-side RDP host that we actually use, so they stay in sync between the client and the server. So just as easy as we have that flexibility of, you know, updating the client, we're actually doing that actually on the host, on the server also. So understanding client states. Now with our billing, you know, when you're using Azure RemoteApp, we have a billing model. I'll cover that towards the end. Just, you guys are technical. That's what information I want to give you. We only charge for active sessions. So if I have actively launched PowerPoint, that's when the stopwatch clicks. That's what I'm being billed for. Now, if I put my laptop to sleep, I'm not being charged for that particular time. We do have a per month billing. We don't do a per hour or anything like that. You get so many hours with it. I can cover that at the end. But just the key point for this is we only charge for those active sessions. Now, like I said, if I have my PowerPoint running and I put my laptop to sleep, at the back end, that RDP session is actually terminated, and that session is actually in what they call a disconnected state. So that's what you see up here at the top. And it will stay in this disconnected state for 4 hours. So my laptop's asleep, I go to a meeting, 2 hours later, I come back, I launch it, the application's gonna launch really, really, really fast because the session's there. But that first morning launch, it'll typically take 15 to 20 seconds. What we see in a non-domain join is about 15 seconds, and in a hybrid deployment, around 30 seconds. Why the difference? I cover that in deep dive in my advanced session, but just understanding there's a difference in that. See, I'm trying to get you guys all to come to my advanced session. So after 4 hours being in this disconnected state, we'll actually log the user off. So impacts of that. You could have run Excel and done a data import or some number crunching thing. Well, after those 4 hours, that session is going to be forcibly terminated. So is Azure RemoteApp a good use for long-running tasks that run overnight? No, it's not going to be. I'll be blunt and honest, it's not. So it's used for the times that you're actually using it. And then we actually have an idle log off where if you've not interacted with it after a period of time, 4 hours, it's actually going to go in a disconnected state. But these idle session times cannot be adjusted whatsoever. That 4 hours is hard-coded by the service. So thinking you can apply a GPO to those, because you guys know about, you can set that if you're on native. Those don't apply whatsoever. We actually overwrite those particular things. Redirection. We use this broad terminology, redirection, to talk about a suite of capabilities that makes this physical device, let's say, I'm using the Surface 4 over here, so my USB devices that are plugged into it, if I had a COM port, my laptop over here has a COM port or whatever, they're made available to that remote app. So imagine if you have scanners or USBs or webcams, if you have redirection enabled, those particular devices will be made available for those remote apps. So a good use case for that is, let's say I have a Windows PC and I have a USB device webcam plugged into it, and I launch, whatever type of application that wants to use that webcam. Well, it's going to be made available to it. And so here's kind of a breakdown of what we have across the board. As our Windows Click Once client is the full client that has everything, and we support everything. You can see iOS and Android just by the sheer capabilities of the platform. We can't do serial port redirection because an iOS phone doesn't have a serial port on it. It doesn't make any sense on that particular thing. So it makes sense for that. We will have a universal Windows client. We have it in preview, but it does not work with Azure RemoteApp today. In here, copy or clipboard and audio. I don't know why it's not. Maybe I have an animation in there, but it'll support that. And then the HTML5 client, which I showed you already, will initially support clipboard and audio. So those are a couple of different things. Very key here is, why is this red circle? Well, drive redirection and USB redirection are not enabled by default. So if you create an Azure RemoteApp collection and you want USB redirection or drive redirection, you'll have to actually go out and install the PowerShell commandlets and actually enable those. And we have a great tutorial doc. It's actually listed in the bottom right-hand corner, right alongside all the rest of our documentations to walk you through actually how to do that. Drive redirection. How many of you guys know what drive redirection is? Yeah, most of you. Okay. So I have drive redirection, as you can see on here. If I were to launch, in my example, Excel, and I go File, Save, it's going to pull up this particular thing, and it's going to show two things here. It's my C, that's my hard drive, and E, I think that was my CD-ROM that I had on my drive. And so those are available to that remote session. So I could pick File, Save, C, and if I browse that, it's everything on my local PC. So it's a way to send information back and forth to that. It's only available on Windows and Mac, and it's not enabled by default. So you need to use the PowerShell commandlets in order to enable drive redirection. User profile disk. Now, I said earlier that we'll never store data actually on the images. Well, where is my user data stored? How many of you are familiar with user profile disks? Cool. All right. Got it. So what happens? She's giving me the countdown on the back, and I'm looking at her. I need to talk a little bit faster if I'm not already. User profile disk. So we mount everything in your user's profile, and when you make a session, a connection, we actually will mount that user profile disk, that VHD, and it's made available. And so everything is stored in that particular. So your documents, your settings, your app data, they all stay with you. You don't need to do anything particular. And there's 50 gigs in size for that. Now, if you want to keep your files all synchronized, there's a couple of solutions available for you out there. OneDrive for Business, Map Drive, Dropbox, SharePoint. OneDrive for Business, or OneDrive for Consumer, that is not supported. It doesn't work on, it works on server, but it's not officially supported, nor is Box. So if you're using any data and file storage, make sure it works and supported on Windows Server 2012 R2. So in terms of OneDrive for Business, there are some considerations for that. It will download all your files. So if you were one of those people that took advantage of the unlimited storage, it's going to fill up your 50 gig user profile disk pretty fast. So just be cognizant of that. There's no selective sync with it. You can customize your remote app. I actually showed you guys how to do that, showed that where it had MVA in the demo. So we've gone through that particular part. Let's talk about life cycle at the last one. We talked about how to create an image. That's just a recap of it. But here are the steps. Now, if you want to bare metal it, there's 10 steps to bare metal it. That would be, I went out to MSDN, I downloaded the ISO for Windows Server 2012 R2, I mounted it, and I created a VM. You need to follow all these particular steps. It's kind of long and detailed. You'll eventually get there. That's why we recommend to use one of our gallery images, because we did all of this, and all you got to do is really install your applications. But if you want to bare metal this and create it, here's the 10 steps. It's well documented. There's a link down at the bottom for you guys to do that. Now, how do you update a collection? Now, we talked about creating it. Now, let's say I created a collection, I installed an app. Now I need to update it because I either want to add a new application, or maybe there was a setting. I forgot to apply a registry setting, or I did something else. Well, the process that you would go through is go back to let's just say go back to that VM. Remember how I did a sysprep, I captured it, became in my template image gallery? Well, just create a VM out of that again. Just go back to the Azure VM, select your image gallery, create a VM from that image. So now you're at like version 2, and just simply install, do all your configurations. Now run the script again, capture, or sysprep, capture, and do the import back again. So it's kind of that just continual cycle that you would go through that. So your changes that you need to make, if you want to update an app, install your software updates, do all of that, the same process of any gold image process that you guys have out there today, using Config Manager or anything, it's the same process for that. Now, when you update a collection, or patch it as kind of we say, there's kind of 2 options that will happen underneath the covers. Is you get to pick 2 user experiences. A user will create that provisioning underneath, and in 60 minutes, the end user will get a banner bar notification telling them that they need to log off. Or you could just select the bottom one, which will say, just kick the users off at the end, and that might cause data loss. So it's always recommended to pick the best one for what you have. That's the cycle of management. And so at this point in time, you guys should probably have a really good understanding. You should be able to go back, deploy Azure RemoteApp, get familiar with it, and all the details needed to choose your different options that you had. Pretty basic, pretty straightforward, but I'm not done. Will my app work in Azure RemoteApp? And so let's talk about this. Let's talk about the big best practices. I want to do a best practices and a recap really, really quick. Is always test your images, test your applications, never store data on them, use file sharing solutions like OneDrive for Business, enable the auto app update. We talked about that. Properly close your applications, and follow our blog and our roadmap. There's always lots of new things coming. So a couple of key recap or common gotchas is, remember, the images, they're just hosts for the OS, or hosts for the apps. That's it. Only one AD directory can be associated with a subscription. Domain join require 80 connected accounts. And we already talked in good detail about the USB and drive redirection are disabled by default. There are 4 billing plans. About 2 weeks ago, we just went live with the Premium and the Premium Plus. And so the basic and standard had always been there. So $10, $15. The Premium is $20. The Premium Plus is $25. The basic and standard, there was a couple of reasons why we came out with the Premium and Premium Plus. It was actually to solve 2 problems. The first one is basic and standard had a 20 user minimum. How many of you guys heard about that? Okay, well, Premium and Premium Plus have a 5 user minimum. So organizations that don't have 20 users, there's quite a lot of them out there that have 5 or 6 or even 10. They didn't want to pay for 20 users. They only wanted to have a less than that. So 5 seemed to be the sweet spot for that, and that's what we have. You know, it's like, hey, I don't want to pay for a case of Coke when I only want a single can for it. So Premium, Premium Plus also solve the need for more, the applications need more resources, so CPU or memory. Those actually solve that particular problem. So it was really great to announce those particular things. Brad mentioned you could get Azure RemoteApp for $2. So we have a couple of promos right now. If you're an existing EMS customer, you can get Azure RemoteApp for $6. If you have RDS partial coverage, $8. And what Brad said is if you have Azure RemoteApp with full coverage with software assurance, you can get it for as low as $2 a user per month. So just think about that. I have $100 that I paid initially for an RDS Cal, and now I've paid $2 a user per month, so that's $24 a month. For $124, you get an RDS Cal to deploy it how you want, either on-prem, in Azure, or Azure RemoteApp, for $124. great deal. You will not find it cheaper than anywhere else. So we talked about the different ways to try. I showed you guys how to do the client over here and administrators. Have an Azure subscription. We have a 30-day trial. Let's talk about the apps. I think I have like a couple of minutes left. QuickBooks. Now, I like QuickBooks simply because it's a really good application that has some nuances to it. And so QuickBooks does have 3 different types of deployment options. This is QuickBooks Enterprise, because QuickBooks Enterprise is the only one that is supported on Azure RemoteApp. You can't do any of the other versions, and I'm going to get to the reason why for that. And so QuickBooks, this example 1 is a central server, where on a particular, let's say in a corporate office or a small office, I have a VM or a server running over in the corner. Each of the users have QuickBooks installed on the local PC, and they just use standard Windows networking in order to get to it. Peer-to-peer, kind of same thing, but a user's on there, or a classic remote desktop session host. All 3 require the company file and database server to be on a dedicated server. You can't just host it up on a file server. And so is QuickBooks supported? Yes. You would need to create a custom image. There's a deployment guide. It's supported on Windows Server 2012 R2. Where the data is stored, it's stored on a company file. The company file should never be on that custom image. I'm going to show you a diagram here. And you're only able to access it on the local network. And so it doesn't matter what type of deployment option, hybrid or cloud, domain join or non-domain join. You don't need a lot of those things. You can pick whichever one is best for you. So let's deep dive into this as like how would you deploy QuickBooks in Azure RemoteApp. So 4 easy steps. Determine your VNet. I kind of had a diagram. I have an Azure VNet that's available up in there. That's step 1. The next is I'm going to create a custom image. I'm going to install QuickBooks on that. I'm going to import it. I'm going to create a collection. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another Azure VM. And on that VM, I'm going to install QuickBooks and the database server. I'm going to enable multi-host. I'm going to enable Windows sharing. And that's what's actually going to host the company file on it. And so as users simply launch QuickBooks from Azure RemoteApp, they're going to launch QuickBooks, and they're going to go File, Open. They're going to traverse that local network using Windows networking because they're on the same VNet to that Azure VM and be able to open up the QuickBooks file. Common example of kind of a 2-tier app with some nuances on it. This is a good example of what that looks like. Kind of same thing if you were going to do Dynamics. Dynamics is the same way. It's a client-server application. You would host the AX actually in Azure RemoteApp, but the AOS and the database server actually sit on a separate box. So fundamentals, I want to remind you guys Thursday at 1700 or 5 p.m., depending upon, I'm American, so I say 5 p.m. We'll talk about that. I'll deep dive on that. How to stay engaged with us. We have a feedback forum. Our feedback forum is very, very important. Linux client is the number 1. I showed you guys. We're solving that with our HTML5 client. Shortcuts in the start menu used to be our number 1. We did that. I showed you a whole chart. Our feedback site is where we decide, one of the huge things where we decide where we make our engineering investments. So if you guys want specific features, go and vote. Go and submit your ideas. We're constantly looking at that and figuring out exactly what's next. And we're just continuing to peel back the layers of the onion on exactly the features that rise up to the top. Our discussion forum, if you have questions, post them out there. We also have our chat. Our documentation, I've written 90% of the documentation. So if it confuses you, you know who to find. Available out there. And then our monthly blogs. Those are the best way to stay updated about Azure RemoteApp. And again, those come out about the 5th or the 10th of every month. That's my email, ericor@microsoft.com. I do reply to every single person that emails me. So if you have a question, I'm here to help answer you. And if you don't believe it, try it. Send me a question. I'll point you to some documentation or somewhere else. If not, right after this, I'll be at the Enterprise Mobility booth talking about that. And then again, Thursday at 5 p.m., we have our advanced session. I'll deep dive into that. I'm really excited. Thank you very much for attending this session. And how much time do we have before the next one, Lee?
So it's actually morning tea time.
Oh, tea.
So you got 15 minutes, half an hour to the next session.
Okay. So I could continue to talk for the next 10 minutes and show some troubleshooting stuff and some other stuff, or do you want to do Q&A? We show you some troubleshooting stuff, or you guys can take off and do some other things? All right, I'll show you the most common troubleshooting thing. We got some time.
And what's
Or goatee. So I'll continue to talk. All right, so I'm going to pop out here, duplicate my screen. Are there any questions as I go through this real quick? You look like you have a question over there. No, I was just pointing at you because you were looking at me. That was it. Front row, you have a question.
When the remote connection's created, what sort of variables pass through that we can from the machine?
Cool. The question was, when I launch an application, what variables can I pass between that? With a normal RDP, you could specify like screen resolution and all that. You can't. There's nothing that you can do that today. So I'd like to talk with you more later on. Yep. There might be certain things that you have. Go put it on our feedback site, but let's chat a little bit more about that. So one of my favorite troubleshooting things is I have, let's say I have Excel launched down here. My favorite things is, hey, my application is running slow. Your application could be running slow of one of numerous different reasons for that. The first thing that I always like to do is a Control-Alt-End. And basically, that's going to send a Control-Delete sequence to that remote app. And so if I go in here and I click Task Manager, it's going to launch Task Manager of that Azure Remote App session. And so if I click more details, so this is of that the VM host that's running. I get to see the CPU, memory, if other users were actually on there. Oh, look at that, you did connect.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, see, you didn't even know that you were part of the actual demo. So she's in that disconnected state because she launched it, and exactly. And so look at this. I'm consuming, just with myself, 26% of the CPU and memory on there. I could look at performance. You could deep dive. So this is an easy way to troubleshoot. Even if an app is hung, I could come in here, and if I want to, I can right-click it, and I could click End Task. You guys are all ninjas and wizards with how to do all that stuff. But this is the simplest and easy trick of how you could troubleshoot it. Now, hey, it could be, I said a couple of different ways that the app is running slowly. One is, somebody's using a lot of memory. It's out of memory, or the CPU is pegged. That's kind of a VM issue on that. Another one could be the latency between your physical device and the Azure Data Center. And what I actually like to use, how many of you guys know about Azure Speed? Any hands? No? I hear some nods. I don't know. This is an Azure latency test. If it actually loads. So what this does is it's actually going to test the latency that I currently have on this particular device to all the Azure data centers. And, rightfully so, the ones here in Sydney are really, really fast, 24 seconds. But let's look back at the one that I had created in West US. It's actually not listed in here, probably because it's so slow. But look, if I were to pick Asia Pacific, I'd have 449 milliseconds. So that would be the remoting latency that you have. You could just be on a latent network. The fix for that is move to a faster network. We can't fix if the highway's congested. I can't go any faster on that. You need to move to a faster network. Our remoting protocol will optimize only to a certain degree. So moving to a faster network will always be a better option. So this is the easiest way that I recommend to people how you can kind of troubleshoot initially if you have kind of that slow experience. I talked to you guys how to troubleshoot. Maybe there is contention on that VM, so you get to look at the resources on that. And kind of the third layer within all of that is actually, maybe it's the application. We actually had a case a couple of times with Dynamics where latency was great. The VM was not congested whatsoever. Users, and it ended up that they did not properly have the AOS and the database, the Dynamics server, optimized. It was pegged in CPU, the database wasn't configured properly, and so at the end result, it was, hey, the Azure Remote App experience is really slow, it's like clunky, it's not feeling. Well, that wasn't our fault, it was the way he had his database. If you had that same problem, if you had installed the Dynamics AX client locally and used it, it was exposing some underlying infrastructure issues that you have. It also could be that express route connection, or maybe you're not using express route, that site-to-site, that latency that has between that. Majority of our customers are using Dynamics. They've just put the AX in Azure Remote App, and they're connecting to their AOS server right over the site-to-site VNet connection. And that seems to work great for customers. today. You don't need ExpressRoute for that. But if you are using Dynamics AX with full Office, I would recommend to use it with the premium plan. Those are a couple troubleshooting things. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
GPOs, if we want to apply customizations, do they follow through?
Yeah. I mean, these VMs in a hybrid deployment they're domain joined. Install Config Manager client, install Ops Manager, Ops Insight, apply GPOs to those. Now, there are certain GPOs that do not apply to those, like most of the group, the RDS ones, because we overwrite those. But like if you want to hide system drives or do something else, yeah, you have full access to do all that. Certainly. They're on your domain. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What about applications interacting with each other?
Yeah. So if I were to launch, if they're the remote apps, they'll interact. But with the local, like I can't have what we call file type association. That might be like if I have a Word doc on my desktop and I don't have Word locally installed, you can't double click it and it knows to launch the remote app. We don't have file type association yet with Azure RemoteApp.
But on the actual, on the remote app itself, so if they say have Outlook,
Yep.
PDF, and you've got Adobe on there as a remote app,
Yep.
that'll launch Adobe
Yeah.
as a remote app.
Yeah, exactly.
But that'll still, your desktop will still think you're in the remote app of Outlook, though, I'm assuming.
No, it'll launch Adobe because you have Adobe as a remote app, correct?
Separate remote app? So
Yes.
your icon on the taskbar will show Adobe as a separate app, or will it be
It will, just like on the bottom down here, it'll launch it. See, we put the little the two arrows pointing at each other, those signify that they're remote apps. Yeah, so Outlook, and if somebody sends me Adobe PDF, if Adobe is actually on that remote app, then it'll just launch and use it. So,
Given that the next guys want to come in and start setting up for their next session, can we encourage you to come over to the
Cool.
Enterprise Mobility Suite?
yep, excellent.
Start asking Eric.
Thanks for your guys' time. I appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day and trip, and see you on Thursday at 5 p.m. or 1700 hours. Cool. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Sam.